Greetings everyone and welcome back to 365 Days of Prog. Today we're going to be reviewing the album Valentines Suit by the band Colosseum.
Hi, my name's Naomi. I'm an avid progressive rock fan, but I'm a long ways from knowing all the prog albums out there. But this year, I'm gonna give it a try. This is 365 Days of Prog.
So as always, before we get into this, here are some of my favorite bits off of Valentines Suit, as I said, by Colosseum. Enjoy! This album was made basically in the generational split of the late 60s and the early 70s, where prog became a thing, a genre of music. Beforehand, it was music that was mainly inspired by rock music and jazz and blues, but in that split of, let's say, 1968, 69, and of course 1970, we started seeing a lot of bands coming out with progressive music, which was starting to define a genre within itself. Of course, some known albums from this split, basically where prog decided to, start being a thing of itself and defining itself. You got albums like In the Court of the Crimson King, which is well known by King Crimson, and you also have Touch by Touch, which I reviewed recently on this channel. And Valentines Suit by Colosseum is one of those albums, an album that was really inspired heavily by other genres of music, but it was later defined as progressive rock because of its initiative in creating this new genre. Now, I listened to this album and I think this is a great album overall, but for some reason I think this album would have been amazing to hear live. I don't know why, I just think that this is this type of music that is so energetic, so lively, so raw, that if you listen to it live, you're gonna have a better time than actually listening to it recorded. And that brings me on to my next point, which I haven't really talked about on this series so far. So in July, I believe it to be in the 22nd of July this year, there is a festival known as Night of the Prog Festival, which will happen in Loreley in Germany. And I will hopefully be attending this festival if everything goes right with coronavirus. I will actually try and go there. And one of the bands that are performing in the festival this year are Colosseum, and I really hope to get to know more of their music until we get to the festival. So I chose this album to put on this list because I wanted to start knowing their discography. Now there are a few other artists that I've also put their discography on this list because I wanted to get acquainted with it, because when I do reach the festival I want to know as most tracks and songs and albums off of each band that's playing. So other bands that will show up on this list that I probably put myself because of that are going to be Renaissance and PFM and Steve Hackett, which you've already listened to with Please Don't Touch. So that's just a quick FYI for you guys. So sorry for rambling on, but let's get back on our point. So Valentines Suit as an album is a great album. I do think that The Kettle and The Machine Demands a Sacrifice are two of the weakest tracks on here. I don't think they're that interesting as a whole, but when it comes to good tracks, I actually think that LG is a great track, and it made me feel somewhat nostalgic and melancholic at the same time. I don't know why, because it's not a sad song in any way, just something about the overall sound and music and timbre that everything has made me feel those feelings. But I actually really love that song. But of course, my favorite song off of here is the title track, the long piece, The Valentines Suit. And I think this track specifically is the one that really defined prog in this album. So the other tracks on this album, they all sound really good, but none of them are distinctively proggy in any way. They just tend to take a lot of inspiration from other genres of music and give their own interpretation of them. But the Valentines Suit really does feel like a proper prog piece that you'd find in many prog albums later to come. And yes, it does take a lot of inspiration from blues and jazz and somewhat swing, I think. I don't know, there's some part of it which really sounded to me like that. And it does do that, but it really gives a whole new light on everything. And I think this track features some of the best keyboards I've heard from this era as a whole. Like, some parts on it literally sound like they've been played by Keith Emerson, although we haven't heard him yet, but it really does sound pretty masterful, and the keyboards are so diverse and overwhelming in this album, and I love them so very much. And I do think that this piece specifically lacks a really good payoff at some point. It doesn't feel all that energetic and epic at some points, and I think there's a lot of setup and a lot of mid times, but I don't think there's a lot of payoff in it, and that could have been done a bit better. But that is to say, this piece is still a fantastic prog piece, and I highly advise everyone that wants to listen to some good long prog music to go ahead and give a listen to the Valentines Suit. And yeah, overall, I think this is a great album. I have to give huge props to the bass and the drums for actually maintaining the energy throughout the album. There's no dead time, dead zones in music on this album, because the bass and the drums, they basically do a fantastic job at filling in every nook and cranny that there is on this album and giving it more depth. And how could I not talk about the amazing saxophone featured on the Valentines Suit, which is also a great instrument, which we've seen a lot of times in later prog bands, and I think it's a great instrument that goes along with prog very, very well. So all in all, as an album and as what's found on it musically, I think this is a great album, and we should move on to the cover of this album. So moving on to the cover of this album, this one is an odd cover in some way. I know it is pretty recognizable because when I saw it when I was making this list, I recognized it immediately, but when I gave it a proper look, I actually noticed that it was a pretty stale cover. Of course, the font in which the name of the band and the album are written is pretty horrendous, but that's okay. That's just a timey-wimey thing, I guess. But the subject matter on it leaves a lot to be desired. I don't really know what we're supposed to see. It looks like there's an angel of a woman, and then there's this pole, and it has this glowing lipstick at the end of it. That's what it seems to me. I know it's not what it's supposed to be, at least I don't think so, but it's an odd cover. But I think this is a good time to actually move on and talk about something else. This is the first record to ever be released under the Vertigo label. Now, the Vertigo label is a well-known label that features a lot of cool artists from back in the day when they made this album to today, with artists I think as Dua Lipa and other artists like that. And you might know some of the other artists that they have, like Gentle Giant and Caterpillar, which I've also listened to, and Black Sabbath and more. And I think I should note this because it's really hard today as a vinyl collector to actually find a Vertigo label record today, because they've stopped making them, at least the old ones. But if you don't know what a real true Vertigo label record looks like, I'll show you right now on my side a clip of the record just playing on a turntable. They have this really cool, unique effect that they have on their records, which I think is really cool for a company to do that with their records and leaves them very memorable. So yeah, I don't know why I had the urge to talk about this, but I guess we should move on. So all in all, when it comes to the rating of this album, I'd have to give it, well, I want to give it a 7, but I don't think it's very fair, because it gets a 7 because of the basically sum and average of all the tracks on here, but I do think that they do not hold the same weight as one another. So tracks like The Kettle doesn't really hold the same weight as the entire Valentines Suit, and I think when you take that into consideration, you actually get a score which is more 8 out of 10. So yeah, this album is gonna get an 8 out of 10. But that is about it, guys. I hope that you enjoyed this one, and stay tuned for tomorrow because we're going to be listening to Crack by the band Aria, another Italian prog, and hopefully it's going to be good. But until then, I hope you all have a wonderful day, and I'll catch you all tomorrow. Bye, guys.